Okay. Hello, this video is aimed to my classmate from Introduction to Literature. I am Natalia and I'm here to talk about the land of the beaver, the maple syrup, and hockey. Yes, I'm talking about Canada, so let's begin. Okay, first of all, the word Canada. The word Canada comes from the St. Lawrence Iroquoian word named Kanata, which means village or settlement. Now, the Canadian flag. The Canadian flag consists of a red field with a white square in the middle. In the middle of the entire flag lies an 11-pointed red maple leaf. The red symbolizes the sacrifice during both world wars. White symbolizes the peace, neutrality, and tranquility of the country. And the maple leaf has historically been a symbol of Canada for centuries. And talking about symbols, other symbols that we can relate with Canada could be, I don't know, the beaver, the crown. They invented the Hawaiian pizza, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, hockey and lacrosse, which are the official national sports, and also something else that we can relate with Canada. Now let's talk about the physical geography. First of all, Canada is located in the North American continent, right above the United States, bordered by three oceans: the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the Pacific. Canada is the second largest country in the world by total area. It stretches over 6 time zones and is divided into 10 provinces and 3 territories. They still have trouble trying to integrate the rest of the land the further up you go, because there are only 2 main highways that lead to Yukon and Northwest Territory, but there are no main roads or highways that connects Nunavut with the rest of Canada. Also, Nunavut is the most northerly inhabited place in the world. Alert Nunavut, that is right here, is a perpetually ice-frozen desolated settlement, functioning as both a militaristic station and a seasonal research facility. The population of this town is approximately of 60 people. Okay, now let's talk about the border. Canada and the US share the longest border between any other 2 countries, with 8,800 kilometers along the way, including the border with Alaska. Then we get to the Quebec-Vermont border, and things are a little messed up when you reach Derby Line and Stansted. Since the town was built before the modern-day borders were properly established, the town has a variety of houses, businesses, and buildings that overpass directly the border. People of each country must enter in on their side, and if they exit in the opposite side of the country, they must stay in the sidewalk and report to the customs office. If not, that can result in arrest. Now let's give some details of the physical geography. It is speculated that 60% of all the world's lakes are found in Canada, and 30% of the world's freshwater are also found in Canada. Tap water can be better quality, or can have better quality than bottled water in Canada. About 40% of the country is covered in forest. Over 60% of the world's polar bears lives in Canada. The Niagara Falls are actually 3 waterfalls which sit right on the border between the US and Canada, and is one of the 7 wonders of the world. Quebec alone can supply about 70% of the world's maple syrup. And the Prince Edward Island has a natural phenomenon in which the sand makes a weird noise when you step on it. You should go YouTube for it. Okay, now demography. Various indigenous people had inhabited what is now Canada for thousands of years prior to European colonization. Beginning in the 16th century, the British and French established colonies, the first being the colony of Canada established by France in 1535. These indigenous people comprised 3 groups: the First Nation, the Inuits, and the Métis. And together they spoke over 60 different languages and from 10 separate language families. The First Nations are Canadian from indigenous groups south of the Arctic Circle. They have over 634 recognized communities across Canada. Inuit people are spread across several countries in the Arctic Circle. Inuit culture is very proud about their hunting tradition. And the Métis and Canadian are a mix of indigenous and European heritage. Actually, the word Métis comes from mixed, eventually developing a distinct cultural identity in their own. Good for them. Nowadays, Canada has about 35 million people. About 75% of them identify as white. 14% as Asians, natives, and Aboriginal people make a surprising 5%. 3% of black people, Latinos at 2%, and the rest are just kind of everything else. Canada is religiously diverse, encompassing a wide range of beliefs and customs. Canada has no official church, and the government is officially committed to religious pluralism. In addition to ethnicity, Canada also has linguistic groups. 1 out of 3 Canadians either speaks French fluently or understands enough to get by. Quebec isn't the only place where French is spoken. Communities in Ontario, Manitoba, and especially the Maritime province like Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia have huge communities of French speakers. And these French speakers have an even deeper level of segregated culture. A multitude of languages are used by Canadians, with English and French are their official languages being their mother tongues. However, over 7.3 million Canadians listen to a non-official language as their mother tongue. Some of the most common non-official first languages include Chinese, Punjabi, which is a language spoken in India, Spanish, Tagalog, a language spoken in Philippines, Arabic, German, and Italian. There are 11 indigenous languages groups composed of more than 65 distinct languages and dialects. Canada has placed emphasis on equality and inclusiveness for all its people. Historically, Canada has been influenced by British, French, and indigenous culture and traditions through their language, art, and music. Indigenous people continue to influence the Canadian identity. During the 20th century, Canadians and African, Caribbean, and Asian nationalities have added to the Canadian identity and its culture. Canadian humor is an integral part of the Canadian identity and is reflected in its folklore, literature, music, art, and media. The primary characteristics of Canadian humor are irony, parody, and satire. Now let's talk about a bit of their literature, is what we are interested on. Okay? Canadian literature is often divided into French and English language literatures, which are rooted in the literary traditions of France and Britain, respectively. There are 4 major themes that can be found within historical Canadian literature: nature, frontier life, Canadians' position within the war. All 3 are which tie into the garrison mentality. By the 1990s, Canadian literature was viewed as some of the world's best. Canada's ethnic and cultural diversity are reflected in its literature, with many of its most prominent modern writers focusing on ethnic life. Arguably, the best-known living Canadian writer internationally is Margaret Atwood, a prolific novelist, poet, and literary critic. Numerous other Canadian authors have accumulated international literary awards, including Nobel laureate Alice Munro, who has been called the best living writer of short stories in English. Now, let's go to government and politics. Canada is a federal parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy, with Queen Elizabeth II being the head of a state. The Governor General of Canada, at present Julie Paget, carries out most of the federal royal duties in Canada, and the Prime Minister of Canada, at present Justin Trudeau, is the head of the government. So, Canada does kind of typically maintain a foreign policy that does encourage diplomacy outreach to pretty much any country that they can grab at. Nonetheless, Canada's relations kind of shadow those with the US, allies with the same allies, and opponents with the same opponents. A funny thing is, although the US complains about the immigration procedure of Mexicans into the US, Canada is actually trying to coerce and entice Mexicans to come into their country. Because of its low birth rates and need for a bigger workforce to assist the aging population, Canada has relaxed its immigration and visa policies. Canada is not only part of the Commonwealth, also the Commonwealth realm. There are 2 different things: the Francophonie, member of the UN, and many other organizations to contribute with its peacekeeping mission. So they pretty much get along with everyone in the world. Now, economy. Canada is one of the richest nations of the world. With a high per capita income, they use the Canadian dollar, and is a member of the Organization for the Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and the G8. The country has a free market economy and a large reserves of oil and gas, global supply of agricultural products, mineral resources, and its automotive and aeronautical industries are the most important. Now, education. According to a 2012 report by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, again, the OECD, Canada is one of the most educated countries in the world. The country ranks first worldwide in the number of adults having tertiary education, with 51% of Canadian adults having attained at least an undergraduate, college, or university degree. Canada spends about 5.3% of its GDP on education. The country invests heavily in tertiary education. As of 2014, 89% of adults aged 25 to 64 have earned an equivalent of a high school degree, compared to an OECD average to 75%. Okay, that's all I have to say about Canada. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy and learn with this video. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a really good day and good night. Bye.